Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an economic theory that ran the world for more than 100 years and the massive intellectual earthquake that finally brought it crashing down. So, let's kick things off with a huge question, one that economists fought over for decades. Is a free market economy basically a perfect self-correcting machine, one that, if you just leave it alone, will always find its own way back to full employment? For a really long time, the answer from most economists was a confident yes. Absolutely. But then, this beautiful, elegant theory slammed headfirst into the brutal reality of the Great Depression. This is the story of that powerful idea and the crisis that shattered it for good.
Okay, let's get into it. To really understand why this idea broke, we first have to understand the machine itself. And this dominant idea has a name, the classical theory of employment.
The whole theory, the entire thing, was built on this one simple but incredibly powerful idea from French economist J.B. Say. The idea is that the very act of producing stuff automatically creates the income needed to buy that stuff. So in their view, you could never really have a situation of general overproduction. It was basically impossible.
And that leads to the absolute core belief here. Economists like Pigou and Marshall saw full employment as the natural default setting for an economy. If there was unemployment, it was just a temporary glitch, a short-term problem. The system, they were certain, would always fix itself.
So how was this self-correction supposed to work? Well, the classicists saw the economy as three separate but connected markets, and each one had its own perfect automatic balancing tool. Let's break down each one. First step, we've got the labor market. And the absolute key to this, the whole thing that makes it work, is the idea that wages are perfectly flexible. They can go up or down smoothly, with no resistance, to keep everything in balance. Now, this graph really shows you how they thought about it. So if the real wage is too high, up there at W over P1, you get unemployment. It makes sense, right? More people want to work than there are jobs available. But the theory says all those unemployed workers competing for jobs will naturally push the wage down, all the way to that sweet spot, point E, and boom, you're back to full employment. It just happens automatically.
Okay, next up, the goods market. The classicists had a pretty neat answer for a big question. What happens to money that people don't spend? Simple, it gets saved. And they believe that every single dollar that gets saved is automatically borrowed and then invested by a business. And this chart illustrates their point perfectly. The interest rate is the great balancer. So if people suddenly start saving more than businesses want to invest, you get a glut of savings. What happens? The interest rate falls. That makes it cheaper to borrow money, which encourages more investment until savings and investment are equal again, a point E. In this world, no money ever just sits around doing nothing.
And finally, we have the money market. For the classical economists, this was the easiest piece of the puzzle. The amount of money floating around in the economy determines the overall level of prices. That's it. Full stop. The big takeaway here is that money was seen as neutral. What does that mean? It means if you just print more money and double the money supply, you won't create a single new job or produce any more goods. All that would happen is that all the prices in the economy would double. Money was just a veil over the real economy where things get made and people work. So there you have it, a really elegant, logical, self-correcting machine. It seemed perfect, in theory. But in the 1930s, this beautiful idea ran headlong into the brick wall of the Great Depression. And this was the fatal flaw. The classical model had zero explanation for what was happening. It said that anyone who wanted a job at the going wage could get one. But now, you had millions of people who were desperate for work, willing to take any wage, and there was simply no jobs to be found. This wasn't a temporary glitch. It was a catastrophic, long-term failure of the entire system. This crisis, this total breakdown of the old ideas, set the stage for a complete revolution in economic thought, and it was a revolution led by one man, John Maynard Keynes. With his groundbreaking book, The General Theory, Keynes didn't just disagree with the old model. He launched an all-out assault on it. He didn't just say it was wrong. He went through piece by piece and systematically dismantled its most basic assumptions. First, he took Say's law and he flipped it completely on its head. He said, you got it all backwards. It's not that making things creates demand. It's that the actual demand in the economy, from people, from businesses, that's what determines how much gets produced and how many people have jobs. Next, he came for the idea that saving is always good. He argued that when people save more, that money is being pulled out of the economy. It's a leakage. This drop in spending causes businesses to cut back, which lowers everybody's income, and the whole economy can spiral downwards and get stuck in a rut, a new, terrible equilibrium at a much lower level of employment. And then he totally demolished the idea that the cure for unemployment was just to cut wages. Sure, it might make sense for one single company, but Keynes pointed out the paradox. If you cut everybody's wages across the whole economy, then nobody has any money to buy anything. Demand collapses, and businesses end up having to lay off even more people. It actually makes the problem worse. This all comes together in his most famous quote. It perfectly sums up his impatience with the old theory. What's the point of waiting for the economy to fix itself in some far-off long run? People were suffering now. Action was needed now. So after Keynes tore down the old classical machine, what did he build in its place? What was the new blueprint for how to think about the economy?
Well, he created a whole new way of looking at things. He showed that actually, it's perfectly possible for an economy to get stuck with high unemployment for a long time. He proved that total demand is the real engine of the economy. And this is the big one, because full employment doesn't just happen on its own, he argued that governments have a responsibility to step in, to manage demand, and to get the machine running right again. This epic showdown of ideas wasn't just some dusty debate in university halls. It fundamentally changed how governments around the world manage their economies. And honestly, the core debate he started, between leaving the market alone versus having the government step in, is a battle of ideas that is still being fought every single day.